Rochelle, are you there?
Rock, I am. I had just taken a small bathroom break. Forgive me.
No worries. How are you?
How am I? I'm okay. How about yourself?
I mean, I think I'm okay.
Are you back in North Carolina or are you still in New York?
I, I'm actually in California. So
Are you?
so we were at Stanford this past year, and I think we're probably gonna. I'll be teaching at Duke this coming fall, but I think we're gonna actually keep the family here for the coming year.
Really? You thinking about living there permanently or this is just a great place to be for that time?
So I don't. This is not. I don't think we're going to be here permanently. There are a lot of things that we don't like about life here,
Hmm.
and I don't think that either of our careers would transfer really seamlessly.
Hmm.
Um, but both Laura's year and our kids really like the schools, especially our high schooler who was hard to move.
Uh-huh.
And they really like their schools. They really like their friends, and they felt like the year ended kind of prematurely.
Okay.
Um, and there are other issues. Laura also might not. This is being recorded. I probably shouldn't talk about it. It's
Okay. No
okay.
worries. No worries. So let me just start with my question and we can go from there. Can you
Yeah,
please tell us your name? Tell us a little bit about you so we can get to know you. Wife,
sure.
children, school, whatever you want to share.
So I'm Barack Richmond. Started teaching at Duke in 2003. Teach at the law school. Teach contracts and property and antitrust and health law and policy. A couple other seminars here and there. Um, we arrived married to Laura Richmond, who is a psychologist and who was in Duke's psychology department for a while, and she is now in Duke's population health department, the medical school. Um, we arrived at Duke with a 2.5-year-old who is now just finished her first year at the University of Michigan.
Wow.
And we have two native North Carolinians, one who is just finished ninth grade and the other finished fifth grade.
Wow.
Ariel is our oldest, Eden's our middle one, and Isaac is our youngest.
Okay. And how long have you been in North Carolina now?
So I guess if we arrived in 2003, that's
Uh,
about, I don't know, I'm going to do the
17,
math wrong, I'm sure.
17, 18 years, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. So let me start in asking, why did you pick law as a career? What was it about law that made it uh, available and likable to you?
So, I, it actually wasn't the law that drew me. I think it was the university environment that drew me and a career of research and a career of teaching. And, uh, I started graduate school in a PhD program,
Hmm.
and I always liked the law, um, uh, and I also knew that I wanted whatever my research would be, I wanted it to have policy implications, and I thought that just legal research, legal scholarship has a natural application um, to policy making. It's more practically oriented kind of research. So I started uh, when I started my PhD program in 1997. I didn't know for sure. I was already accepted to law school. I didn't know for sure I was actually going to go to law school.
Hmm.
And the reason I did is because I felt like my research trajectory, it was a PhD program, it was mostly economics, but it was a PhD program at a business school. Um, the people who were graduating my program were teaching at business schools where, really the research agenda is how do you get a firm to make more money.
Right.
I actually, I view business school scholarship and business schools in general more favorably now, I think, than I did back then.
Hmm.
But ultimately, it's about making the market system work and work for you.
Hmm.
And I felt like getting a law degree would just really help my research agenda, thinking about public institutions and public policy and the public interest. Um, and I'll tell you, when I went to law school and was finishing up my PhD, I was open to going into an academic market that would take me to a policy school or even a business school. I mean, at that point, I had a kid, and I was just really kind of anxious about getting a job.
Mhm.
Um, but the law school market seemed to open up. Um, I mean, there was, whatever. So I don't want to make it sound like my path was preordained, or we're all kind of following paths the way they take us, and we make decisions accidentally that turn out to be really consequential, and
Yeah.
we think we're making decisions, but we're really not. And but I'll say that the class, the law school classroom is a classroom where I feel like it's it's the classroom where I've always enjoyed spending my time. I love legal education. I love teaching law students.
Mhm.
I like legal scholarship in general. So it was I guess a series of accidents that got me in a place where I feel like I'm doing what I'm reasonably good at, and I certainly love what I'm doing.
Yeah. President Broadhead told me a similar story that, he didn't start out to be a president of a university, really wanted to be a professor teaching literacy or literature or something of that nature. And he eventually evolved to where he was before he retired as the president of Duke. So I think that's pretty much correct. We all kind of stumble into our careers. It isn't like we went to elementary school, walk up the first day and said, "Oh, I'm going to be an astronaut." Sometimes it's just something that triggers you. I would say my husband is the one exception. From the day he was born, he knew he was going to be a teacher, and he's been a
Right.
teacher, and he's an exceptional teacher. So that is one of those examples. Let me ask you this question. So you mentioned both policy, health, and wealth. Tell me how they correlate to each other.
Yeah, they correlate with each other in remarkable ways, in ways that we don't um, in the ways we don't acknowledge, I think, in the way we should. So we have in America, and certainly all of the industrialized world, and even more so in the in low income countries, we have enormous wealth inequality, and that affects everything that we do. It affects the schools we go to, the doctors we see. So in that sense, you have this economic inequality that has been getting worse since the 1980s, um, and that shapes everything.
Mhm.
Um, but when you think about health inequalities, it's not just about being able to afford to see doctors or not.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that misperception has influenced a lot of our policy making. We think that if you know, if the only thing that contributes to our physical well-being is the ability to get high quality or reasonably high quality medical care, then we say, well, let's just give everybody health insurance. Um, and the U.S. has done the worst job of that in the industrialized world, but we still do have public health insurance programs. But even in countries where they do that really well, you still see health inequalities across socioeconomic status. Um, and we, it's not, we should really confront that. Um, you know, it, we should recognize that access to medicine and access to doctors is not what really makes us healthy. It's an important part of what makes us healthy. Um, but even in societies where they equalize that across income, they have not equalized health outcomes. And in that sense, the health disparities are much more ingrained in the kind of inequality that we have in a society. Um, and Laura, my wife, studies this stuff. She studies determinants of health. In fact, actually, I saw your interview with Brian, which was just an incredible conversation.
Really.
And I'll just take a small piece of that. He mentioned that he took a class with David Williams at Harvard, who is somebody who Laura follows very carefully. I'm familiar with his research only because Laura has told me to read his stuff. Um, and there's lots of physiological mechanisms in which not just economic inequality, but also racial inequality leads to bad health outcomes. Higher allostatic load, more hypertension. You have food deserts, which often leads to diabetes, and you have neighborhoods that are not conducive to exercise. That leads to lower cardiovascular health. You also just have, sense of control over your life. There's a fascinating study called the Whitehall study in the UK, where government employees will all have the same kind of health insurance, exhibited different health outcomes based on what kind of job they had. And we don't know it. We don't entirely understand what contributes to these health inequalities, but where you grow up, where you're born, the kind of social networks and social support, social resources you have, the kind of autonomy you have in society, the kind of relationship you have with the establishment, the kind of how stressful it is to go about your daily routine. All these have really meaningful health outcomes. They have nothing to do with the health system, at least the formal delivery of medical care. Anyway, that's a very, very long explanation for why we see inequality in the U.S. And it's the relationship that economic inequality does and does not have with health inequality.
With what we've seen with COVID, so when it first came out, I guess it started in China, and it's moved across the world because people travel and are able to move freely about on the planet. But what we've come to know lately, that it has much more a serious impact on persons of color. And does that correlate to what you just explained about health inequities? So, because, and I'm going to ask you a question, might be a little bit uncomfortable question, but we have been taught, we being Black people have taught that coming across the ocean in the bottom of the sea contributes why we are so susceptible to hypertension. Now, I don't know if that's a fact or not, but the fact that our ancestors were in the bottom of a sea, at the bottom of the boat that was in the sea, and because of the amount of salt and the length of the trip was kind of cohesive enough to say this is why we have this. Now, I read something, I think it was a Pew Research said that there are higher instances of Black and brown people who have obesity. It didn't go into great detail, but it did say something to do with scarcity with economic resources. So in other words, many Black and brown families can't go buy organic bananas or organic kind of foods. So in your mind, are those statements correct, or is there some misstatement of or misinformation on those statements?
So no, there's no misinformation. I mean, there was a really interesting study by a Harvard economist. Roland is his first name. His second name is escaping me. That seemed to indicate that survival surviving the transatlantic journey in a slave ship was enhanced by the ability to sustain moisture in your body, which, after life in the United States contributes to a certain degree to high saline retention of salt and leads to some cardiovascular issues. There's some economic evidence and some physiological research that suggests that mechanism is well, your question was, is that true? And the answer is there is some truth to that. Certainly, access to healthy foods there's vast inequality in that across the United States, and that certainly leads to health inequalities. But there are a lot of different mechanisms, and those are just two: access to poor access to healthy food, the physiological consequences of the transatlantic ship. My wife Laura is watching me. Says, this is her stuff. So I'm repeating. I'm repeating a lot of this. She does more than me.
Tell her I'm happy to talk with her too. Anytime she.
All right. Maybe I'll connect the two of you. But those are just two mechanisms. I mean, another mechanism certainly has to do with the interface with the formal healthcare delivery system. There's obviously centuries of racism and discrimination that not only has led to differential health outcomes, you know, doctors treating African American patients differently from white patients, but also the degree of trust in the formal healthcare delivery system. If you don't, if for good reasons, if you don't trust the delivery system, you're not going to follow instructions. But the other thing, and this really is the David Williams story that we're talking about, that really is independent from the origins of African people coming to I guess America, and also physical inequalities in neighborhoods, is just the allostatic load. She's laughing at me because I'm talking about her research. I do this all the time. All the important things I say comes out of her research.
It's good. You know what they say, happy wife, happy life.
Well, in my case, it's a smart wife, you know, reasonably smart things to say.
Yeah.
But you know, but the other thing is that you know, and that's very particular to the pandemic, but it's also reflective of other inequalities. You know, being able to social distance is a luxury. It's a consequence of economic privilege. And if you can't isolate for economic reasons, then you're more likely to be susceptible. So there are a lot of things, I think, that explain this differential. And you know, and they're all, the way I think about it is that there are lots of different expressions of inequality. And therefore, there have to be lots of different remedies that we pursue. I mean, you know, alleviating economic inequality is obviously really important, but that's not going to solve everything. Creating a more trustworthy healthcare delivery system by just, for example, you know, diversifying the medical profession is really important, but that's also only going to alleviate one source of inequality. And in many ways, you know, COVID-19 has illustrated the many dimensions of health inequality. And yeah, and I'll just say as a closing thought, one thing that Brian's interview conveyed in a very effective way is that, you know, you look at the numbers and you're just confronted with the kind of inequality that we have. It's a yeah, it's a very, what we're seeing now is a very, very plain and clear illustration of these broader structural inequalities.
So to touch on the other two, so let's talk about wealth. So there's the 1%, the people who have all the money in the world, or in the expression, more money than God. Then there's the upper and middle class, and then there is the people that live below the poverty line. So as you said, there's nothing, addressing one part of it won't fix it. But one of the things that I talk with Jabril, and I can't wait to see Jabril's talk, because he talks about you. But one of the things I find really, really fascinating, you know, is like, so first there was 40 acres and a mule. Then there's been a gazillion discussions of reparation. And then you look across your shoulder and you see the Holocaust, and you saw what horrific things that were done to these people for no reason other than their ethnicity. But somewhere in the world society, we saw how horrible that was, and we tried to compensate for that. Whereas when you turn to the other side and look at slavery, 400+ years of this, and there's been no interest in compensating for that. You know, we have a Holocaust museum. Fortunately, now we have a Black museum, but it really stops there. So in terms of wealth, what do you think are the things that prohibit persons of color from having wealth? And then secondly, what relationship does wealth have with safety, being alive, being safe, being able to interact with the community?
I mean, yeah, the second part, I can only imagine. I mean, I have a very, I think I have only a superficial understanding. I mean, this is not the experience that I grew up with. But it's very, I can only imagine, and part of what's happening in the last couple weeks is the articulation of this um, this challenge, this structural challenge. It's very hard to do anything if you don't feel safe.
Right.
It's very hard to relax, very hard to think, and it's certainly hard to go out and build something. Yeah, there are lots of stories about fearing police in public places, driving at night. I mean, these are all things that would be really helpful if you want to build a business, take economic risks, work hard. So that's just a very narrow part of your question. I mean, feeling safe I just think is a prerequisite to so many things, including, by the way, just having good relationships, good friendships, a healthy family. It's hard to imagine just being able to sit comfortably with your loved ones if your physical safety feels under assault. The thing about the thing about wealth accumulation that especially has that illustrates what I think is the real distinction between the reckoning of slavery and the reckoning of the Holocaust is that the narrative that I grew up with, that we, white America or even America at large, that keeps talking about, is one of success. We just, there was slavery, but we fought a civil war and we stopped slavery. And there was Jim Crow, but we had the civil rights movement and we stopped Jim Crow. And then we even passed all these anti-discrimination laws. And it's a very self-congratulatory story. And the Holocaust, of course, is not a self-congratulatory story. It's a story where, there are companies or people that probably were complicit that weren't held to account. But for the most part, it was this global horror that Germany, I think, almost on a daily basis, certainly through public art and expression, it is living an apology for. It was a recognition that the world failed the European Jewish community, even to the degree that there still are survivors living, there's always a sense that we really have to help these people because they lived through some atrocity. And the people who lived through the atrocity of slavery had to live through the atrocity of Jim Crow, of post-Reconstruction. I mean, there was never never the empathy, never the recognition that we really, we as a world have really wronged this population, and we forget about reparations. We just owe them our apology, our sympathy. This was really, really an awful thing that we did to them, and there was never that conversation at all. So when in the post-Holocaust world, you had Jews coming to America, you had Jews going to Israel, and there was a sense that we owe these people something. We have to, we need a state of Israel so they can have some kind of political autonomy. We don't want ever the Holocaust to ever happen again. We have to relax our immigration laws so Holocaust refugees, although we didn't do it as we could have, but we allowed many refugees to come to the US. We encouraged them to make this their home. They had lots of economic support, both from informal charities, but also from the government. I mean, there was a welcoming. Yeah. And they were allowed to be and feel as Americans within one generation.
Why do you think that's not the case for former slaves and the ancestors of slavery? Why do you think that we are still inhuman? Like, I think when I watched that video, and I will tell you it's a very difficult video to watch if you haven't seen it, to see someone put their knee on someone's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. When I think about reparations, like, even if what they've said the man did, which I don't know, the man that was killed for selling Lucy's. All of those are economic injustices. He didn't have money, so he was trying to get money for his family. If the man, Mr. Floyd, was killed because he passed a counterfeit $20, which I don't know if that's true or not, but that's at least what some of the social media have said, are all speak to economic inferiority, and not a congruence of opportunity. I mean, even myself, I mean, I've been in Duke 12 years and I'm in the exact same job I've been in from the first day I walked into there. I've been paid a little bit more, of course. I'm not poor, but I still struggle. You know, sometimes I live paycheck to paycheck because I have a sick child and, you know, I have to pay for him to go to school and all of these things. But when you kind of boil that down, why aren't there reparations? The apology, great. I know a lot of people that have apologized to me for what their ancestors did. And it's great to hear it, but it doesn't put food in my refrigerator. It doesn't put money in my pocket. It just makes me know that someone that does not look like me understands my situation. But when I can't get an even footing with you or some other colleague because I have no place to start. I would be willing to guess that when you and your wife pass, you will leave your children a legacy, homes, money, stock. Will I? Probably not. And so when I ask you the question about wealth and equity, I'm asking, how do we being Black and brown people, get there?
I don't know. I mean, it's the mechanism you describe at the very end is so important. The ability to, you know, you're not just, you know, not just have a job and not just pay your bills, but being able to invest in an education for your kids, being able to accumulate some kind of capital to pass on. I mean, you know, that's not a luxury. That's what needs to happen. I mean, the middle class, especially people of color, it's not about, you know, it's not just about getting a job. It's about being able to accumulate capital and not expecting the next generation to have to fend for themselves from the beginning. So how do you do it? I don't know is the honest answer. I mean, I have some ideas in the sense that, you know, how we overtax some populations and undertax others. So, you know, more progressive taxation would be important. Really important for middle class families, middle class individuals, especially Black and brown people, to be able to start their own businesses. That's important. So being able to make sure that the capital markets work for them, they can get access to loans. You have communities that support minority-owned businesses. I mean, you know, but I'll be honest. I mean, you know, and I'm saying this as an institutional failure. I mean, I'm an economist. I'm supposed to kind of have answers to this stuff, and I really just have conventional suggestions. And part of it, I think, is because, you know, economists don't. I mean, I do think that economists think about discrimination and racism, and they think about how societies discriminate and how communities can be insular. So I give them credit for trying to think about things that are beyond just, you know, understanding how markets work and how they don't work. You know, but you know, we don't really, economists don't really have good understandings of how the real world is, how implicit bias or attitudes or how the implementation of loans and capital markets, how they actually work on the ground. There's a lot of yeah, for lack of a better word, I think this word, I was going to for lack of a better word, there's a lot of systemic racism that that economists don't really grapple with, don't really know how to grapple with, even despite genuine efforts. And I was going to say about the term systemic racism, it's almost so vague as to, you know, not absolve everybody of responsibility. It's just kind of out there.
Yeah.
And until economists or policymakers really understand, you know, how that individual banker is making decisions and how that affects people of color, until we really understand that, you know, there's going to be a lot of injustice that's going to be perpetuated.
I'll share this with you. Two thoughts I have in that school. One is that when we send Black and brown kids to school, we send them just like everybody else. They learn the 3 R's: reading, writing, and arithmetic. So they've gotten that. But what's different, I think, in my mind for Black and brown children is an understanding of money. You know, we know we live in a capitalist society, so we know when they put out the newest pair of Jordans, most children who play basketball are going to want those shoes. And those shoes don't cost $20, but more like $200 and $300. And so when you don't have a grasp of what money is and what it's used for, to see it as a tool, it becomes vaporized because it's gone before you even get it. You know, because you can't think about, do I need to put 10% of this into my savings account? Or do I need to put 10% of this into my child's college fund? And then in other cases, it's, do I have enough to pay my rent, buy food, buy clothes, and buy the things that my child needs? So you've got all of that floating around. And the reason why I raised the Holocaust, you know, every time I see it, I watch Schindler's List almost every year around Easter, because, you know, you look at this and you think to yourself, what human being could do this to another group of, I mean, starving them to death, putting them in cages, and then, I mean, it's mind-boggling. But I'm Black, and, you know, I also see the pictures of Black men hanging, being castrated, you know, Emmett Till, so many of those. And so when someone put the knee on Mr. Floyd's neck, the knee has been on our neck since we landed in this country. And so we're supposed to pull up ourselves by the bootstraps. What boots? Where are the straps? Because we have none. So there's that part. And then the other part of it is, I think that if you don't have anything, you can't get anything. So I read a book called The Color Line, and it talked about redlining. So we were intentionally left out of education. We were intentionally put in slums and ghettos. We were intentionally left on the fringes of society. If a Black person moved into a white neighborhood, all the white people up there moved out. And we have been assaulted, if you will, by stereotypes, you know, the N-word, the angry Black woman, the violent Black man, you know, whatever it is. And it's everywhere. And I think specifically for me, the world in which I live in, I have a pretty good life. I'm not poor, but I'm nowhere near prepared to leave my legacy for my children yet. I'm nowhere near that. You know, I'm struggling to pay for my son to go to college right now. And still, I don't know how I'm going to do that. And what am I going to leave my children? You know, so when someone can do something to try to advance themselves, and I don't advocate any of this. I don't advocate looting, rioting, selling drugs, robbing. I advocate none of that. I think all of that's wrong. But if that's the only way you know you're going to eat, what else can you do? And so when, and not you, because you're a lovely man, but when economists sit down and think about this, I think what they need to do is don't bring the wealthy elite among Black and brown people to the table to have a discussion, because they're there already. They're in the same room with them. They have the same monies that they have. They say they have, but people like me, and there are tons of Rochelles throughout the world, just tons, you know, bring those people in the room, because we can tell you what it's like. Like, so we had back in the very late December, early January, we had McDougal Terrace in Durham, where they had carbon monoxide poisoning. If the 1% took 1% of their income and gave it to that 13 or 14% of Americans that make up Black Americans, they wouldn't even feel it. And they could fix the problem. But there's something so ingrained in us that we don't want to see Black and brown people move from the situations that they are. And and we're not the best advocates for ourselves because we're so afraid that if we say something, we're going to lose our job, or we're going to lose our friendships, we're going to lose our opportunity. So we end up muted and invisible. So I think when economic professors and people in Federal Reserve and all these different people think about that, I think they really need to think about it from a different perspective. Not that you're giving somebody a leg up or bootstraps, whatever it is, but you're helping them change their narrative for their children. Because I would guess majority of my white friends' children are set for life. My children, I don't know. And both of my children are adults, so like I don't know. And I just turned well, I didn't. I turned 61 in November. I'll be 62 in November, um, but I don't have that much longer to put in the fight. So when you think about this, I mean, is that possibly a place to start, to have people that are in the trenches talk and engage with people who are thinking about the economy and the well-being, health, and all that stuff? Is that a good place to start?
I mean, I think it's certainly a good place to start. I mean, frankly, yeah, the conversations that you're leading are so, they're so small in number. Yeah, and it on one hand it's so rudimentary, but on the other hand it's so infrequent.
Right.
That it's a terrific place to start. It also indicates how far we have to go.
Yeah.
One thing that you said a minute ago, I don't know if you did it on purpose, but
Probably, but I am amplified.
I mean, it's something that is really is worth feeling. So it's the second time you talked about the officer on George Floyd's neck, and how not only how inhumane the act was, but how inhumane his face was, and his colleagues were all completely devoid of any kind of emotion or sympathy, or it was very inhuman. It was they did not see George Floyd as a human being.
Right.
And I think the analogy I think you made, again, whether intentional or not, is the 1%. Do they see working and lower class people as people? Do they have a kind of humanity to it? There's a very self congratulatory attitude. I earn my money. The market system works. We make good investments, and if anybody among the masses does something of value, they'll attract whatever investment they need to survive, and that's that. And of course, that's enormously problematic. There's a lot of reasons why that does not happen. But even taking that aside, you don't talk about redistribution as just an act of humanity, as something that there are people in real need,
Right.
and you are not in need. And why do we have to talk about it beyond that? So that lack of empathy, the lack of common humanity in what we saw in Minneapolis and what we see year after year in American tax policy, again, this is a connection that you made. I think that's a connection worth talking about.
Yeah. Let me ask you a generic question. Have you or any member of your family ever felt unsafe in society? Any part of America, wherever you've been in the world, have you ever felt unsafe to your person?
I mean, physically unsafe.
Yes.
The number of times I was traveling in Southeast Asia, and especially when I was in Vietnam, it's a communist country. No due process. I felt unsafe. But yeah, I was mugged 2 times. I felt physically threatened those times. But these are moments few and far between.
But the
And
unsafe, it was because of the color of your skin or because of proximity where you were in that space and time?
well, I think both. I mean, I think the fact that I was white and American in certain parts of Vietnam made me less safe than, say, someone who was Vietnamese in that moment.
Mhm.
Um, but I mean, one thing that one thing that's always important to recognize when I say I felt unsafe is to say, well, I always knew that I could go back to where I came from and feel perfectly safe. It was not a constant state of fear. It was it was very situational, and it was never existential. It was never um, it was always felt temporary.
Right. So, have you ever been pulled over or stopped by law enforcement?
Hmm.
What was the first thought that came to mind?
You know, it was never ever the kind of things that that Brian was talking about, or that the kind of reactions that you hear from African American men.
Yeah.
Never like that. I did something wrong. I'll tell you one thing. So I did something wrong. I hope he doesn't give me a ticket. Maybe I'll you know try to apologize. Do I but I would actually say, yeah. I mean, it's actually, here's an illustration. I get pulled over by the police. The worst possible outcome that I worry about is that he actually gives me a ticket.
Right.
I'm really hoping he doesn't give me a ticket. I'm hoping maybe I wasn't speeding. Maybe he pulled me over for something else. Maybe, if I apologize, he'll give me a warning. But getting a ticket is the worst possible scenario that I'm imagining.
And that's
Um,
powerful, Barack. That is truly powerful because for us, that's the least of our concern. We might be concerned about the ticket. How much is the court cost going to come because we may not be able to afford that. But that is the least. That's the last thing we think about. We think about, are we going to make it home safe? I don't know if I told you this before. You've been to my house a couple, 3 times. You know my son and my daughter. My son goes to Greensboro College. It's 48 miles from our front door to his front door. And the minute he pulls out my driveway, I start praying. And I don't start praying until he arrives on campus. When he says, Mom, I'm coming home, I start praying until he pulls into the driveway. And my fear for my children and for my husband, all Black, is are they going to make it home safely? And that's my prayer every single day. Make it home safely. We have the normal troubles of marriage and living together as a family. Everybody's gotten on somebody else's nerves or something like that. But our whole goal is, can we make it home safely? If the man says we were doing 75 and a 76, okay, let me pay my ticket and go on with it. Because I'm not going to be able to afford a very great lawyer who's going to get me out of that ticket. But let me just say, but can I get home safely? And one other thing I'll share. So people, especially white people, were outraged at the acquittal of O.J. Simpson. And in reality, we were not celebrating O.J. Simpson. We were celebrating that finally a Black person had justice, or what we thought was justice. Now, whether this man did that or not, I don't know. It's not for me to judge. But that's what we were celebrating. And a lot of people find fault in that. My friends who called to check on me and see how I've been talked about, why are you people loitering, rioting and setting fires and looting? And I don't know whether it's Brian or somebody said it so perfectly, because maybe this is the only way I can get your attention, which is just profound to me because I had never thought about it that way. But maybe this is the way we get your attention. So that was just really that, and from what I know, I've known you for a long time, and I know how much you've meant to the students that you come to my house and talk to. You give advice and guidance to, you help whenever I call for help. You're always right there. But you have something that I don't, the ability to do that. You could not call me and say, Rochelle, I need you to help me get my daughter into Harvard. I have no way to do that. But I could call you and say, Barack, my son wants to go to graduate school at Harvard. Can you know somebody or somebody I can ask to help? You can help. I can't. And to me, that's the difference in skin tone and ethnicity. is that I have very little to give you, very little. If you ask me for help, literally you'd be asking me to make you a pound cake, which I could do, but that's literally the extent of what I can do.
So so two things. First of all, I think you can do so much more than that. And I gotta say, this conversation is something that, whatever it's. I can't think of anybody at the law school who would do this, and this is really important. I'm very touched. I think it's really and it's good for me. I mean, it's we have it is good for me that we're having this conversation. It was good for me, frankly, for me to listen to the conversation with you and Brian. That's good for me, and that's something that very few people. Even if somebody like Guy or Trina, an African American colleague in the faculty, had a conversation, it still wouldn't be the same. So you can do, and you do a lot for me, and I want to emphasize that. And the other thing is, I mean, I'm very touched that you say that I do a lot for you, that I listen, but I can do so much more. And part of it is because these things aren't on my mind all the time. Yeah, when I drive at night, I don't put myself in your skin or your husband's skin. I just don't think about it.
Right.
But part of it also is, just when we I think white people just don't think about what they can do.
And I think part of it, they may not know what to do because you feel uncomfortable approaching a Black person and having a very uncomfortable conversation because you don't want it to go the wrong way and you don't want to lose that friendship if that matters to you.
Right, but and so that always means that we wait for the African American colleague to come to us,
Right.
And we might not know what to say, and it might be awkward, but that's cowardice. At the very least, go to a colleague and say, "How are you doing? This was really, George Floyd's murder really bothered me. I'm sure it bothered you even more. How are you doing?" How difficult is that?
Some people can't do that though. They can't because they can't see me. I am invisible and voiceless. And when you talked about these chats, every time I do one, I recognize I could lose my job. Dean Abrams or whoever walk in and say, "You're fired. This is not what Duke policy is. This is not what we think Duke should be doing." President Price could say, "Hey, I don't think this is what you should be doing. We're going to fire you." And when I first started, I was afraid of that. At this point, I've lost interest. I mean, like, how much more can you do to me? What else can you do to me? Because I'm not doing anything to you. I mean, I'm telling people, and everybody asks me, "Why are you doing this?" Because like they had the anti-racist thing at the law school. They had all these things, deans, surveys to students and all that stuff. But the staff, the few of us that are there, nobody even knows we're in pain. We're hurting. We're not doing well. We're sad. When I saw that man die and call for his mother, I felt my life passed through me because, like, if that were my son, I wouldn't even know how to process that. I wouldn't even know how to think about that. If that was my son or my daughter, or somebody that had their knees or their neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. And I asked my husband, if you held your breath for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, would you live? And he said to me, because first I thought you would just automatically die. He said, no, if you start breathing again, you would not die. But that's just 8 minutes and 46 seconds. It's a long time to hold your knee on someone's neck. And for the Black and brown community, we've had a knee on our neck since 1619. Different ways, but a knee on our neck. Economically, health, opportunity, pay, promotion, all of that on our neck. And I ask of you and all of my white friends, check on me, see how I'm doing. Call me up and say, "Rochelle, how's your day? Are you doing okay? Rochelle, you want me to come bake you a pound cake? I made some of this. You want me to give you something that shows empathy, something that shows that you see me as human. And I know you see me as human because I can come in your office and bother you for hours about things steal your books, all that kind of stuff. But I know you see me as human. But if you saw my husband and you didn't know him, would he be human to you? If you saw my daughter and didn't know her, would she be human to you? You know Everett, you've seen Everett, so I assume he would be human to you, but I don't know. And that's the question. I'm not just asking you, but that's the question I'm asking white America. Just because you know Rochelle and you like Rochelle and you have a good relationship with Rochelle, I'm not just Rochelle. I have a husband and 2 children, and they are everything to me. So if you see me and don't see them, then you literally don't see me.
I mean, so first of all, I did meet your husband. I met him at one of at your home, and I will never forget. It was celebrating. It was celebrate. I'm embarrassed to say which of your accomplishments we were celebrating, but we were celebrating you. And I remember him saying, "Very to see, we're very proud of her," which stuck with me.
Yeah.
So when I think of your husband, I think of a very human person and a very human sentiment. But that's not your point. I mean, it's I mean, you're absolutely right that yeah, that the what's there to say? I mean, the I know that the burden, the knee on the neck is something that is felt very viscerally, and I would like to think, and I know that I can do better in expressing empathy on the very most basic level.
Yeah.
And look, I mean, it's something that I've been talking about with my kids a lot, and I think, it's something that is that intellectually they know, but feeling it is very different. And maybe this is part of what we were talking about before about, how American history, white American history, is very self-congratulatory.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, slavery is wrong, Jim Crow is wrong, inequality is wrong, but
Right.
but there's a certain degree of empathy that that frankly is you have to work on. And I know I'm very gratified that you feel empathy from me, but I know that I have to work on it, be more empathetic.
Yeah.
And
I would say, you have at least 3 or 4 colleagues. That you got Jim Coleman, Guy Charles, Trina Jones, and Tim Lovelace. Those are the 4 Black faculty I think I can think of, maybe more, but those are the 4 that I know really well. Have the uncomfortable conversations with them. You initiate the conversation. You go and ask Guy how he's doing. Go ask Guy what does he need, and he's not going to tell you he needs you to send him $10,000. He's going to tell you how he's feeling. So you don't have to worry about it being a money conversation. Just ask him what does he need. Take him to lunch. Go somewhere and have lunch, have an extended lunch, and just sit and talk about the weather or something, so that he knows that you're there for him. Your students, if you go back into the building and you teach face to face, reach out to your Black and brown students, and let them share with you their stories. Because I think this is how we change the conversation. Every time somebody asks me why I do this, it's because since Mr. Floyd's death, not one person has asked me what I think. How do I feel? One person where I work, or one person where I act, where I'm most active. So I'm an advocate for women and Black and brown people in STEM and IT and what I do. I mean, all my Black friends have asked and called and checked. A few of my white friends have asked and called and checked. But the power that you have, teach me something about economics. Teach me something about policy. Give me a chance to get a leg up. Give me a chance to get somewhere else. And I'm not talking about me specifically, but I'm talking about Black people as a whole, a chance to get up. Because, how do we know what we don't know? And I'll give you this last thing. We have about 5 minutes. I'm really gonna let you go, but I'm gonna tell you something. You remember the Equifax breach?
Yep.
None of us are Equifax customers. We do not. We're not. They're not our mortgage holder. They're our credit holder, if you will. They hold our credit. But none of us have a one-on-one relationship with Equifax. We can't call Equifax up and say, "Hey, how much money is in my account today?" No. But when that breach happened, the response to it was just amazing. And Governor Raskin did an amazing thing. She wrote a book about it, where 60-70% of white people took advantage of what they offered, protect your credit for a year, giving you free credit monitoring, and those kinds of things. Less than 7% of Black and brown America did, because they don't know what they don't know. That's why I said teach us something to help it. I mean, simple conversations about credit. I will tell you, I got married when I was 17, and probably until I was 35, I didn't know what credit was. I knew I didn't have it because I couldn't even get a drink of water free, and everything I got, the rate was just exponentially larger than anybody else's. But that was probably because I had been such a poor credit user, But now I sit on the board of the State Employees Credit Union. I advise, and my advice is always help Black and brown people understand what credit is, understand what money is. So you get $100 in your hand. That does not mean you rush right out the door and go spend it. It means you divide it. You think about places. So I leave with that. The rest of the conversation is yours. You have 3 minutes to say anything you want to say.
Well, I'll just say that there's, well, what's there to say? I just, I'm really happy that you reached out to talk about this, to talk with me about whatever. I'm really happy that you're doing this with other people. And when you, and as much as I think I know that I can push myself to be more empathetic. I think I know that I can push myself to reach out more, but I also should know what I don't know. And I don't know a lot. And that's how these conversations are. So it's one reason why these conversations are helpful. I mean, in addition to just seeing you and connecting with you, it also, it tells me stuff I don't know.
Yeah.
And that's really helpful.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you were a part of my life, and thank you for being there. And in case that they do fire me, tell somebody that if they need an IT director, here I am. So that might happen. No, you joking, but it may happen. But thank you so much.
There's a lot about Duke that I don't know about.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's just, again, this is being recorded. Let's leave it at that.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you so much for this.
Thank you,
tell
Rochelle.
my kids I said hello, kiss the girls, tell them I got presents for them. So if I get to see them ever again, I still have their present. I promised to give them, so I still have it. So please tell them.
That's really sweet.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
You do well, okay? I mean, I hope you're doing well, okay. And even without this, it'll be good to talk sometime.
Absolutely. Whenever you want to, I'm always here. They're letting us work from home. At least now we've heard to through the end of July. God only knows what happens after that, but that's where we are right now. Yeah. So absolutely. Anytime is good for you. I know your schedule is busy, but anytime I'm happy to talk. Take care and stay safe.
See you later, Rochelle.
Bye, dear.